Welcome to Level Up, or as I like to call it now, How to Be Better at Your Job. This is the podcast where we cut through the bullshit. We give you the real, actionable tools to reach your career goals and thrive. Whether you're just starting out, climbing that career ladder, or redefining your role, this is where we unpack the stories, the strategies, and the skills that make the difference. I am your host, Brian Bell, and I am thankful and honored to everyone listening and watching wherever you are in the world today. One quick favor that would help tremendously, go ahead right now, just like the video even before you watch it. And please subscribe to the channel, to the Level Up channel right now. Pretty please. All right, you did it? All right. Today, I am super excited to welcome someone who has mastered the art of personal branding, leadership, and community building, Trish Lindo. Trish is the real deal when it comes to surviving and thriving in both the corporate and entrepreneurial worlds. From her time at LinkedIn, leading global creator management programs, to founding Too Ambitious Consulting, she's been at the forefront of innovation, storytelling, and strategy. Not to mention, she also hosts Too Ambitious Live. That's a platform to spotlight trailblazing women of color. If you've ever wondered how to craft a standout professional brand, how to navigate corporate America as your authentic self, or what it takes to truly connect with your audience and everyone around you, this episode is for you. It's definitely for me. Trish, welcome to the podcast. Let's get into it.
Woo!
How the hell are you? I appreciate you. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. This is such a nice honor to be here with you and to have this important conversation, And like I said, I love your name, Brian Bell. So you just need to go ahead and be famous with that. So
I wanted to be a news anchor way back in the day, but then I saw how much they were getting paid, and I went to school. I went to school at University of Missouri for journalism. And I said, my tagline was, I'm going to be the next Tom Brokaw. And that ages me. And then I did my first year and I was like, oh, they're working really hard for a little amount of money. So this is going to do it. So I appreciate the compliment, but this is where it stops, I think.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we have a lot in common. I went to Florida A&M University, have a degree in broadcast journalism. So we both, went on the path, but look at us now, I mean, you're already a host,
All right. Look, we made it. There we go.
We made it.
Ask, what year did you graduate from FAMU?
A while ago.
Oh, okay. All right. I have a really, really good friend, Kalina, who is still heavily involved in all things FAMU. And so that's the only reason. But yeah, we won't put dates. That's all good. That's fair. I got you.
Yeah, it was a while ago. That's how we say it.
I understand. Okay. Before we get started, I try to break this up into sports-related themes. This is the Mamba podcast, the Level Up Mamba podcast. And so I'm trying to think about it from the eyes of how athletes approach their work and how they prepare. And so that's how I'm approaching this of like, if I was a top level athlete, how do I approach my sport? If I'm a top person in my career or entrepreneur, how do I approach that? And so I'm going to break it up into more sports-related segments. Before we get started to that, who are you? Why do you think Angela said, Brian, you guys should connect? And then as soon as I talked and as soon as I saw a resume, I was like, please come on the podcast. Tell the people who you are.
Hello, people. Hello.
Hello, world.
Hello, world. So I'm Trish Lindo. I'm a personal branding architect. So I work with women organizations, and I basically work with their members to help their entrepreneurs or executives to teach them personal branding strategies. So I help people to figure out what they want to be when they grow up and how to share that across social media. We know that social media is not going anywhere. And, believe it or not, there's still a lot of people out there who haven't really defined how they want to show up, how they can add value, and how they can leverage social media, especially LinkedIn, to grow their personal brand and grow their businesses at the same time.
I know that this is a paid service, but we're going to try to squeeze out as much of the juice of all the amazing stuff of how to make that work. Personally for myself, because I just went on this journey of I'm going to post something every single day on LinkedIn, which is scary. I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not. So this is going to be super fun on the LinkedIn side and just the personal branding in general, which it's never talked about. So once again, I'm really thankful that you're here. And I think that it's going to open a lot of eyes to, wait, this matters. All right. The first segment, it's the pregame. Let's talk about the foundational years. We talked about who you are, but what first inspired this passion for storytelling, community building, branding? How did you get started here? Was it when I was 3 or was it in college? What was it?
Well, no, definitely when I was maybe like 5. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, well,
So
it's like that.
no, definitely not when I was 5. I had no idea what my thoughts were when I was 5, other than eating a lot of cake. But, I was fortunate enough to start my career in entertainment in Los Angeles. So after I graduated from Florida A&M University with a degree in broadcast journalism, much like you, I wanted to be an on-air reporter. And then when I looked at the salary and then you had to, go to like some small town, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So I moved to LA because I loved entertainment. I loved working, learning about celebrities. I was just fascinated by that world. So, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that's why I moved to Los Angeles to start that journey. Now, I think that storytelling was kind of a natural progression as part of that industry, how you tell stories. My first job was working at Paramount Studios as a PA. I was, getting people coffee and, picking up scripts and delivering scripts and everything like that. And then my next job was working at E! So that's where I really kind of started to learn how to write scripts, how to tell a story, how to effectively communicate in a way that not only entertains, but informs as well. In addition to doing a lot of red carpet. So, I was going to premieres, I went to the Golden Globes, the Oscars, the Emmys, you name it. I was just enamored with that world. The storytelling part was something that, at the time I didn't realize that was something that I needed, but I was picking up that information and learning the importance of how to craft a story, having a beginning, middle, and end, and how to show your personality in a way that, basically can entertain, but again, inform your audiences as well. So I'm very grateful for that. And a lot of my early career was working at places like Yahoo as an entertainment producer or working at CNN as an entertainment producer, doing the same thing, crafting stories, going out into the field, going to a movie premiere, interviewing celebrities, going back to the office, writing up a story, getting those really important, important things like who's getting married, what's your next movie, that sort of thing. All of these things matter because people want to know. People are curious. So how can we tell a story that is interesting and, gets people to read a story online, gets them to click, because we all know the importance of a CRT, a click-through rate. So that's where I sort of learned all those skills at the beginning. Now, as far as the personal branding stuff, at that time, I can tell you that, I think personal branding, like you hear more of it now in I would say maybe in the last 4 years or so, like
Probably.
you hear it everywhere. But like 10 years ago, I never heard of personal branding. So, I was on a path as it seems, but I couldn't put a name to it, if you
And
will.
I will say that even though 4 or 5 years people been talking about branding, I've never seen anybody actually act on it. And what that actually means, people say the word.
Yes.
So we're going to get to some of that too, because sorry to interrupt, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, I had an opportunity to work for a lot of big brands, CNN, OWN, BuzzFeed. And I think during that time, using my ability to write, I remember I worked with a producer very early on in my career, and she taught me a very valuable lesson. She said, Trish, if you know how to write, you will always have a job, and it's a skill that is never going to go out of style. Never. So she was like, learn how to write, learn how to tell a story, and you'll always be fine. Now, as someone who was moved out to LA with only $200 in her pocket, parents were like, good luck. You can always come back home if it doesn't work out. I took that and I was like, I'm going to be a great writer. I'm just going to be able to tell a story. So, yeah.
And I think, and for people listening or watching, it's important because I know about 10 years ago, I had a boss, 15 years now, told me that I needed to be good at PowerPoints and one pages. And I'm like, that's just a bunch of bullshit. It's just a waste of time. And I got beat into it. And maybe because I'm in HR and I have to work with the execs and you have to learn to tell the story. But if you want to be successful at almost any part of corporate America on top of it, you have to be able to tell a story. Otherwise, you'll get spit up and shoot out.
Yeah.
You're preaching nothing but truth.
Yes.
Let's talk about at CNN, you're at own. You were at Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to start here, and I don't want to go down the racial rabbit hole, but are there any lessons that we can take away, that you took away, about navigating the corporate world, especially as a woman, especially as a Black woman?
Yeah, I think that when you are Black and a woman, obviously we know that the intersectionality is there. And it is something that I will say that when I was starting out in my career, had no idea that this was going to be a thing, right? No clue whatsoever. But, you work in enough corporate spaces and you realize that it's a thing. So I've been in meetings where someone asks my opinion, I give my opinion, and then I get a message afterwards that says, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I'm like, "Great, yeah, let's talk." I'm thinking, "Yeah, what's going on?" "Oh, well, you seemed a little angry, And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? I'm not angry. Like, you asked my opinion, I told you. Like, that's how I talk. God forbid if I sounded authoritative. So it is difficult, and it's been a challenge. I would say that if you're starting your career, and I speak to a lot of people who are just starting their career, only like a few years in their career, you have to understand that is something that is always at play.
Yes.
It always is. Now, we can positive think our way out of it. We can affirmations it. We can, get mentors or whatever. But at the end of the day, until America changes, that is a constant. That is something that you always have to be aware of, that is at play. And when you are Black or a woman of color or even a man of color, that is something that you need to be aware of explicitly. Like, there's no way around it. It plays a role in whether or not you could potentially get a promotion, whether or not you get the benefit of the doubt, whether or not, someone asks you one question versus 50 questions, or whether or not you get into your office building. Like, why are you here? You're like, well, I work here, and like, yeah, you need to prove it. So I think that we cannot afford to be naive about that simple thing. It's something that is always, I think, going to play a role in how we sort of navigate these spaces in corporate America. I have friends who are, based in London and Paris, and there's the same issues, of course, different levels, but yeah, they deal with the same things too. And I think that there's a lot of us who, and I get it, you want to believe that the world is not black and white, but unfortunately, in corporate America, that is something that you will deal with. There's no way around it. So
I don't know how many times I've ended up being kind of the de facto mentor to especially a lot of Black men at companies I worked at, and there's very few of us.
right.
And nobody ever told me this, but so I feel like it's my obligation to make sure I'm telling as many people that look like us, you have to play the game. I
Right.
didn't want to play the game, and I actually went into some of my first jobs saying, I refuse, I will not do it, I don't care what people think.
Right.
And I got spit up and shoot out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a game, and you don't have to play it, but you're not going to be on the carousel ride much longer if you don't.
Yes, it's very true. And it is unfortunate. It is. I hope, maybe in another generation that won't be the case. But unfortunately, there is a game that is always being played that you have to sort of learn how to navigate it from the time that you walk through the door, or even if you're working remotely, that it is going to be a factor. And I think there's always lessons that you can be learning when you work in corporate America and being a Black person or person of color. There's always lessons. Some of the things that I've learned that I'll, share, some of the things that I've learned is that, and I'm sure you've heard this too, is document everything, right? Document everything, in addition to your wins, you put your wins down, but in addition to is putting down like, hey, I met with so-and-so, we discussed this, that sort of thing.
And don't do it too late. Like,
Don't do it
regularly
too late.
document as you're going along, because the worst
Exactly.
thing is something happens and then you have to go back months.
Exactly. And try and remember it. And God forbid if you have to go to HR and be like, hey, HR. And we all know, first of all, HR is not your friend. They're not, So you want to make sure that you have all of your documentation. And I would suggest also too, not to have it on the work computer, have it on your own personal computer, documenting what has happened, how things are progressing, so that if, for instance, you may get laid off or they decide to let you go right then and there, they shut off your computer, you still have your documentation if you need it later for legal reason.
And you never know. I know everybody thinks like that won't happen to me. It's happened to all of us.
Yes.
By the time you are, let's say 35, that might even be going too high. By the time at least you're 35, it's going to happen to you.
Yes.
So please don't go around thinking it won't. It's going to, unfortunately. I hate to, I don't want to call it out, being negative, but
it's true.
Anyway, document.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, I get it. We all want to be positive and stay in the light and everything like that. And that is, you should always try and do that for sure. But you also just can't sort of live in this bubble and think that these things aren't true and that they're not happening, because they are real. There's many people who have experienced it, still experiencing it. It's very challenging. And, I think the other aspect of this is when you want to get promoted and get to that next level, you want the manager title, the senior title, the VP title, hell, even the president title. That's a whole other game too. It is all in who you know, and it's about relationships. It's about building those relationships around your corporation, not only in your org, but at the executive level as well.
Can I ask you if you were going to give it a percentage? Because people are like, I'm doing my job and I do it well. That's like, what would you say the percentage is doing your job? Because you do need to do that versus the relationships and the politics. What would you say the percentage is?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely 60-40, maybe even 70-30. Because I'm sure you've seen it too. There's many of us that see people who get promoted that you're like, man, they don't even really do nothing. They don't even do nothing. But they know everybody. They're like the person. You watch people fail upwards, and listen, not take anything away from the people who are failing upwards, go with God, but you have to sort of realize, again, to your point, is that there is a game that's being played, and it's super important. Now, I have a couple of schools of thought. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong if you're a person who's like, I'm going to come into this company, I'm going to do my job, keep my head down, and sometimes that works really well, especially if you're not managing a team. And if you're like, yeah, I'm not trying to get to that next level. I'm happy where my job is. I love this job. Great. It works. I've seen it work for some people. But if you're ambitious and if you're a person who, is like, I'm trying to get to that next level, I have a goal in mind, then it's, yeah.
And even if you're not even trying to get promoted, let's say you just want a 3% raise next year or a 5% raise.
There's that.
To keep up with inflation. Like, if you want anything,
at
some point, like you said, though, if you don't care, cool.
Right. You're absolutely right. For those percentage increase, salary increase, more stock options, higher bonus scale, all of those things are things that these corporations will offer, and they're not given to you for free. You have to do something. And a lot of that is playing this game, talking to Bob or talking to Sam about whatever, or letting them know some of the projects that you're working on, spearheading a project that aligns with the company goals. Those are the ways that you can sort of make that leap. But again, it's not easy because, again, like we said, race is always a factor. So, yeah.
Let me see. This might dovetail into this, but the things that you just listed, having the conversations, signing up for another project to help the company in some way, it feels like that's building your brand. The networking is actually building your brand. But I would like you as the expert to speak to it. Like, how did you, just as you're coming up, how did you approach building your professional brand? How's that evolved? What does that mean for us that are new in the world, or for us that have been doing this for a while? What does the brand mean, and how did you approach it? How do you approach it now?
Yeah, for sure. So, my branding might be a little bit different from most people. So while I was working for these different corporations like CNN and Yahoo, I was building a presence on Instagram. So I was a content creator. I'm still a content creator, creating content. And I was all about fashion and style. I love fashion and style. And I was a girl about town in LA. So if we work together 9 times out of 10, what happens when you work with people? I follow you, I saw your outfit. You're like, yeah, whatever. And that was before personal branding was like a thing,
Got it.
So what I was known for was people were like, oh, Trish, she always dresses really nice. Also too, I made sure that I did good work. Anywhere that I worked, I made sure that it was thorough. I always put my best foot forward. So I became known for that. And in a place like Los Angeles, where it's all about relationships and networking and getting your next job, most of the jobs that I got, especially when I was in LA, was from word of mouth. It wasn't because I, sent a resume or something like that. When I got my job at OWN, someone referred me to that role. To this day, I have no idea who referred me. I never gave them my resume. I have no idea. And no one ever said, hey, by the way, I referred you. Like, no one did. So
You got
who
some good
knows?
friends. You got some good people around
Yeah.
you.
Right. So, it's good to sort of have that background where if someone brings your name up, they say, oh, yeah, I've worked with them and they're all about this. And, so you have to stand for something, whether it's consistency. Now, the other thing that I became known for was my passion for working with women and elevating women. Because when I was working at Yahoo, I was producing a lot of fitness series at Yahoo, and a lot of it was geared towards women. So I ended up working with a lot of women there. Then when I worked at OWN, I was working with, it's Oprah. So working for a female founder and icon. And also a lot of the content was geared towards women. You talk about health and wellness and spirituality. And then when I was working at BuzzFeed as well, I was working with a lot of women and basically positioning these women to basically tell their stories. Because again, a lot of people don't know how to sort of position themselves. What I do when I'm working with clients or people that I've worked with before, I try to figure out what's your mission statement. You got to have that mission statement in your mind of what it is that you want to do. And what is it that
Interrupt real quick. Okay, I'm listening to what you're saying. Should I literally sit down right now, pen and paper, and mission statement, type it out?
Yeah.
Did you do that? Is this an actual exercise that you did to make sure my mission is to ...
Yeah. When I say the mission statement, a lot of it dotted line to your why. What is your why? What is it that you want to accomplish with your personal brand? You have to know that first, and then it leads into writing a mission statement. Now, how it usually starts is I tell people and some people they need to write and other people it's easier to type. So whichever way is better for you.
I just aged myself by saying pen and paper, whatever.
Right. No, but it's still a thing. I still write things down because it lands in my mind more. But when I'm actually ready to then when I write, I'm like, this is what I'm thinking. Then I'm like, so everyone's different. So there's no judgment. But I think that when you are trying to figure out, okay, what's my personal brand, you need to write down, I'm going to say 3 things that you are good at. Everybody's good at something, right?
3 things that you're good at.
3 things. What am I good at? And then another thing is to write down 2 things that you are passionate about. What lights you up? What is something that you can talk about that nobody else can talk about that you get excited about? That you're like, oh my God, you got to do this. What do people come to you for? Your friends and family or strangers or whatever. Like, hey, I heard about this. And you're like, oh, okay. And so that's kind of how I started. Now, what I realized for me, people were coming to me for fashion. They're like, can you help me put together an outfit? That's constant. To this day, that is still constant. The other thing was anything tied to social media. Well, how do I do that? Well, can you help me with this? Because you're real good at that. And then another thing is, and it's personal branding, is it wasn't called personal branding, but they're like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how I need to show up. Like, what is it that I need to do? Because it seems to be really easy for you. Now, I am grateful that I had that experience and that background in media and journalism to learn how to tell a story. So I see it very quickly than, let's say, a person who maybe works in finance or has a finance background. They're just like, how do I do this? So I flexed that muscle. I pulled from my experience from the past to basically help not only myself, but also the people that I'm helping now to tell their stories. And it really starts with why. Why do you want to do it? What is it? You know?
So it was starting with the why, 3 things that you're good at, 2 things you're passionate about. And I think you actually answered the question I had in my head of, I think a lot of people are like, I don't really know what I'm passionate about. But if that's the case, then it's what do people tend to come to you for? How do people tend to naturally come to you to ask you something, or what do you find yourself naturally gravitating towards? And that's probably a good starting place. I would say that.
Yeah, for sure. It goes across the board. So, for instance, I met with a woman a couple weeks ago who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she's very successful. She has all the things, the TEDx, she's writing a book, like she's well known. She's on Good Morning America and all these stuff. She does all the things, but she's just like, okay, now I want to craft something on LinkedIn, but I've got all these things. Like I'm already doing all these things. How do I show up? So I basically asked her, because if you think about it, she already has all the things that everybody wants, right? So I'm like, what is it that you want? What is it that you actually want? And she was like, I really want to help people. She was like, all of this stuff is great, but I want to help people with the work that I'm doing. I'm like, okay, that's a place that we can start. So with the work that you're doing, you want to help people. Here's how you help people. Maybe put out a newsletter, of resources for people. You're constantly sharing your ideas and thoughts. Maybe you put a Calendly together. Hey, free 15-minute calls for me talking about this particular subject. And so all of your posts moving forward are with that thought process. I'm trying to help people be better at relationships, their personal relationships. Okay, great. Now you need to start sharing information about that. Give them the tools, give them the resources. But you can see how it's easy to sort of be all over the place when you're doing all the things and you have all the things. Now, for somebody who is just starting out, they have no idea what they're doing. What I typically do is I do that same exercise that I shared with Earl, is trying to figure out what it is that lights them up. Like, what are you excited about? And it could be anything. Some people don't even know it because they never really thought about it. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, especially in this day of social media, because what we're doing is comparing ourselves. We're comparing ourselves to other people. So it's hard to kind of have your own voice and your own thought, because you're too busy. We're inundated with so much information that you're like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I see this person over here doing this. That looks cool. But is that what you want to do?
Right. You're chasing everything forever. Otherwise, if we go that route.
Exactly. So we try to focus that. And then you find out, somebody's like, I really like art. I'm into it. I'm passionate about it. I go to museums all the time. I go to these art fairs. I'm like, okay, let's start there. Let's talk about that, because you can talk about it. You're excited about it. Oh, I went to the Louvre. Oh, wow. Okay. Tell me about that. So it's really sort of owning in on that. And I would say it's better to have one thing at first when you're starting out, just one thing, and then you can expand from there. If you try to do it all in the beginning, it's just as confusing. It's overwhelming. You're doing too much.
I used to think there was a badge of honor to do a billion things, because it made me feel like just a ton of activity, and then I failed at all of them.
Yeah.
But I was doing a bunch of running in place, though, so got nowhere.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, and you can do a lot of things, but typically you can't do them all well, as we know. And then the other thing is if you do not have a team behind you. I've worked with women who have 3-4 people that they're like, hey, this person handles this person handles this. I'm like, great. Now I know this person can handle more. I'm going to give this person this person this, and they can work in tandem. But if you're just you, which is usually an executive who working at a company, they do well, or they're an entrepreneur or solopreneur, it's just you got to focus on just one.
Yes.
You'll drive yourself nuts trying to do it all.
To wrap up that point, and I can't think of the name now, but I had an old boss at Attentive, Anthony. There's a website that you can go to if you're listening to this, and just Google motivators and passions, and it's like a card game. And so it's like, do you prefer this or this? And it walks you through all these different ideas. I can't think of the name right now, but if you just Google discovering my passions and motivations, free, it's a card game. And it was really helpful even in me figuring it out, because in HR, you're trying to figure out what is the next step. And so this is powerful what your point is, but find a way to figure it out even if you don't know. It's okay if you don't, but there's a different tools to figure it out. Okay, let's move to the second segment. It's called the Power Up. We're going to keep talking about this, but let's talk about the skills and the strategies, especially going a little bit deeper in building that professional brand. So first it was to figure out the why, and you kind of hone in on what your passion is. What are the other key steps people should take to establish a strong personal brand, especially now that everything is digital first?
Yeah, for sure. The main thing, I think, in the age of social media is to figure out which platform makes sense for you. We know there's a million of them out there, right? You do not need to be on all the platforms. You really don't.
Sure.
I am sure.
Yeah.
No one has that kind of time.
Can I ask a question from the expert? What platforms are you on?
You can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, and IG.
Okay, so you
I'm on Threads too.
okay.
But to be fair, LinkedIn, Threads, kind of the same right now. But YouTube, I think, is a really great platform for storytelling. So when I do the show Too Ambitious, that's where it goes to. I am in the process of thinking through my YouTube channel and really expanding it beyond the show. But I would say my main platforms that I'm actively on any given day, it's either LinkedIn or IG.
Okay, and so you're a woman of your word. Stay focused, because I have people like, well, why aren't you on this thing? I'm like, I've never even heard of some of these things that you're talking about. Blue Sky, so that's good. Okay, sorry, keep going. So let's find your platform.
Well, yeah. And I mean, these platforms, I mean, you mentioned Blue Sky. I mean, we know that is, one of the newest ones that are out there. And Blue Sky, it has the similar UX to Twitter or X. And, it just kind of all depends on which one you want to sort of focus on. I will say that pretty much 90% of entrepreneurs that I work with, LinkedIn is their main platform. And then it's either Facebook or Instagram that is their secondary. And it depends on the type of business that they're doing. If they're selling products, or if it's just, hey, I wrote a book and I have this community, that sort of thing. The other thing too, though, is that you can have your LinkedIn, but you can also build something that is for you. You can have your email list through your website. I think it's super important to have a website, because none of these platforms we own, right? So you should have your own entity. You can also have a newsletter through Substack or maybe Beehive. Those are great platforms for launching a newsletter, and they, a great revenue stream as well. But you can tie them back into not only your website, but you can also funnel it back to your LinkedIn, take a couple of snippets from your newsletter to create a post on LinkedIn, and then send people to the full newsletter, So I think that's another way. And I think the other way too is, how are you going to show up? Like, who are you? Like, most people are like, hey, I prefer video, or I prefer to write, or I just want to do both. It depends. There's no right or wrong way to do that, but it has to be something that is doable, that you can do consistently, right? So if you do not like shooting videos, if you don't want to be on camera, do not commit to being on camera every day. Yeah. If you're like, I'm a better writer, then write. Just write. Write your story, especially on LinkedIn. Text still does well with a great image, I might add. Pictures are forever. So I would say to write the text and then also create an image with it as well. So that does well. But video is picking up now on LinkedIn. Everybody's trying to compete with TikTok. So more video content. But again, if that's not a muscle that you want to flex, that's okay. That's okay.
Let's dig in on LinkedIn. You work there?
I did.
What are some more things that you've either working there, and obviously one of your main platforms is LinkedIn. What makes people stand out? You said video, but are there other things that make people stand out on LinkedIn? Can I do something better than?
Yeah. On LinkedIn, and I think this might be true for other social platforms, depending on the platform. But the most important thing to stand out on LinkedIn is consistency and have a point of view. Like, have a point of freaking view. So you're in HR. So what's your point of view on HR, right? That's pretty broad, right? So you can't just talk about HR, because then you're just like one of many, right? So how do you narrow that and sort of talk about this specific part of HR, and make it true for you? So because that's what people want to show up for you for. They want to know, what is your unique perspective on this? Now, I talk to a lot of people who are in HR, and everybody, it's like, hey, not everybody, but people talk about DEI. Some people talk about work equity. Some people are like, I'm a remote work like advocate. We remote work all the way. Some people talk about how do you keep your colleagues well, like mentally well? There's the mental health aspect of it. So, you kind of have to decide what piece of that very broad topic you want to focus on, that you want to be known for. So then, whatever that is, then people are like, oh yeah, Brian Bell, he talks exactly about this and he is the expert on this. And once you sort of figure that out, that's what people come to you for. That's when the press shows up, Forbes and Insider and all those places show up for you, is because you have a very specific point of view that you talk about within this very broad space.
Forbes, if you're listening, I'm focusing on career growth. So when you're ready to talk, come to me. Yes, that makes sense, though. I get it.
There you go. Exactly. And I think that, what I've seen that really works too is people who have a particular way of delivering their message. So, but it's true to them, whether it's, they talk very frankly, whether they're being funny, whether they're very like straight-laced and everything like that, but it's whatever that works for you. But you show up in a way that's interesting. Listen, we could all be on social media, but social media there is an entertainment factor. People want to be entertained. I mean, it's not Gladiator, but people want to be entertained, So, and guess what? A lot of people don't realize that on social media, people are scrolling. What is going to get me to stop and look at your post versus anybody else? Like, I'm scrolling and I'm doing 50 other things at the same time. So you have to be compelling, you have to be interesting, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there. So that's how I noticed that people who are successful on LinkedIn, they have a point of view, they're consistent, and they find a way to share that's entertainment and valuable as well. You're giving valuable information, but you're entertaining as well.
I have a lot of, myself included, but I have a lot of coworkers and friends that are like, I want to, have my personality, or I want to, be more visible on LinkedIn and just on social media, but I'm worried about my job. And so you say you have to have a personality, but this is a weird and maybe a tough question, but like, what are your thoughts on like the parameters you should set in order to be able to be yourself, but you also got to show up to work or not get canceled because random person was like, I heard that Trish, who works at LinkedIn, said that one thing and now I want to cancel. How do people break out of that? Because I even worry about it.
Yeah. And I completely get it. And I've dealt with that myself as well, being at LinkedIn. I would say first and foremost, and I'll just start at the beginning. If you were just starting a job, let's say you got offered a job and you're like, I'm so happy. I've got a job. They're giving me money. This is great. You need to look at the contract, because some of the jobs will say you cannot be on social media, or if you do X, Y, and Z, even if it's on your personal account, that could affect your employment. So you need to look at that, right? The other thing, the next part of that is if you're already inside of a company, you need to check with, your HR and see like, hey, just trying to figure out, like, is it okay for me to post about X, Y, and Z? And some companies are like, yeah, we don't care. Do you, as long as you're not disparaging the company or, and I don't know, I'm just making it up. But let's say you're like, yeah, I'm, being overtly sexy or showing something or being whatever, then yeah, I don't think many companies would have a problem with that. It'd be like, well, but if you're a person who, let's say you're an HR person. I'll take you an example. You're an HR person, but you're like, hey, I really love to talk about how executives can start their own business, how they can start their side hustle or whatever. There is some level of similarities there that you can still share that. So what company would be like, yeah, Brian, I don't really want you to be talking about that. It's still you. That's your thoughts. Be like, hey, here's how you can start a business. Or if maybe you're like, hey, I'm really into real estate. I love real estate, that sort of thing. So maybe you talk about real estate. And then if the company does not mind you posting, then talk about real estate in a very professional way. Now, if the company is like, "I really prefer you not to," that kind of thing, that's fine too. That I call that an opportunity. Because if you are with a Fortune 500 company and they tell you, "We really only want you to be kind of talking about the company and the type of work that you do," fine, make it work for you. To have a Fortune 500 company behind you is a win,
Right.
right?
That's a good call.
It's still an opportunity. Whether someone's going to say, "Hey, you know what? I saw your post that you wrote up for, being at this Fortune 500 company about your thoughts on HR and how to ladder up, in your career. You want to go to Switzerland to talk about it and be on a panel about it?" I sure do. I sure
Yeah.
do. Yeah, I do.
And you're right, though. But one, it's just clear. Like for the longest, should I do a faceless YouTube channel or can I mask myself? And there's too much stress and pressure to do all that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can absolutely find a way to have both things coexist in a way that both
Absolutely.
people win or both parties win.
Exactly.
It just takes a
And
little bit of time to think through what that might
it
be, but
does.
you can do it.
It does. And it is, you have to ask questions. You have to ask the questions. You have to go to HR and ask the questions. Or you need to have the conversation beforehand. Like, for instance, when I started working at LinkedIn, I had to sign a disclosure that said that everything that I was doing before I started the job does not affect LinkedIn in any way. That I literally signed that document. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, whatever. I'm not in competition with them. It all ladders up. So you kind of have to look at that. But for the most part, the people that I've spoken to who are like, yeah, I'm at this company, I don't really know like what I'm really into and that sort of thing, ask the questions first at the corporate level and then think through what you want to share and how you want to show up because it might be completely different. I remember I was speaking to this one woman. Oh, she works at LinkedIn. She works like in LinkedIn sales. She's been there for a while and everything like that. But she's like, but I really want to talk about burnout. She's like, I research all that. I want to talk about burnout and I'm a little nervous to post. And I was like, it's LinkedIn. Like they're not gonna be like, you can't post about burnout because you're in sales. Like, yeah, that's not too far-fetched, you know. Now, if you want to write about, hey, I'm launching my big sales program and my sales funnel, they might be like,
You probably should talk to some people about that first.
"Wait, yeah, I think you're trying to steal some of our customers," like that sort of thing. So you kind of have to have a realistic approach to it all. But at the same time, here's the thing that I always say is that you have to look out for yourself. You have to be brave enough to stand up for yourself and to build something for yourself. Because as we know in tech, which is imploded, that there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. So build something for yourself. Even if you're like, I'm just going to have me a Pinterest page or I'm going to have a YouTube, like build something for yourself. Do not sit in these corporations and think like, hey, all is well. I'll be here for a while. I keep getting my checks because you just never know.
Never know. But something that you said there was if you can use your company to help kind of bring you along
Yeah.
in some type of way or use the people there or you have another audience or if they have a way to help promote,
Yeah.
especially if you're able to publicly disclose that and they can also help you, that is actually pretty freaking brilliant, to be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, there's tons of people who do it. I mean, you look at some people. I mean, we think of, let's say, Bozoma St. John, right? She leveraged her relationship with those companies.
Right.
And now she has her own thing. Now she's gone from those companies, but now she has her own thing. Felicia Butterfield, she was tied to Google for many years. She's now off doing her own thing. So you can let that company work for you,
That's a
get you
true
to that.
springboard.
Yeah, to be the springboard to get you to that next level of whatever it is we want to know. And then there's another guy. He used to work at TikTok. He's known as now he's Sir Candleman on IG because he built a line of candles.
That's amazing.
Kudzi, his name is Kudzi. He built his brand at TikTok. He was a marketing guru at TikTok. Was going everywhere. He was literally everywhere. Going to Dubai, hey, yeah, I'm talking about branding and TikTok, whatever. And he just kind of started slowly talking about candles. He's like, I really love great smelling candles. I started talking about it, And then he just left TikTok maybe about a little over a year ago. That brand is in the stratosphere.
And works for himself. And because he was intentional about his brand, used the people around him as a way to kind of push and grow instead of trying to do it alone.
Yep.
And like I think you mentioned a little bit ago, being consistent. And so
Exactly.
the last piece here, and I want to go to the next segment. When we talk about consistency, are you posting every day? Like, what does consistent mean to, especially on LinkedIn, to get more followers, or on YouTube to get more followers? What does consistent practically look like?
Yeah. Well, consistency is a little bit different based on your schedule. Yeah, because we all have different levels of priorities that we need to put up with. I do not have children, but for people who have children and a dog and a partner, it might be a little hard for you to show up every day. So be consistent in what is doable for you, what is sustainable. So I'll say for LinkedIn, if you are trying to gain your followers, you're trying to grow, you're like, I'm trying to grow, I need to be posting. You need to be posting every day on LinkedIn. You need to be posting
weekends are Monday through Friday.
I would say pick one day on the weekend. Typically Sundays are
once
good.
a day. I've seen people posting 6, 7, 8 times a day. How often?
They're wrong for that. Don't do that. No one has time for that. And plus the algorithm is only going to push one post anyway. So once a day. If you are posting twice a day, that means something has happened and you're just, catching up. Let's say you posted in the morning and then something happened. You're like, oh my God, this is my wheelhouse. Maybe it's newsworthy or, whatever the case may be, but it needs to matter. Yeah, I follow a couple of people who post a couple of times a day and I only comment on it once. Like, I don't have time for you posting twice a day. The other thing, consistency, if YouTube, you need to be posting every day and that is 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's good
7
to
days
know.
a week.
That's
no
good
way
to
around
know.
it. No way around
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I have 3 kids. I'm married. We have a dog boarding business. I don't have time either. When I end up finding a partner, I have a co-founder and I have a partner, and I'm like, look, I need your help posting every single day. And there's tools, there's Opus that helps you kind of schedule out clips. But one of my partners, Brian Hill, is like, I was like, I need you to own this. And so no matter what it is, if it's, like you said, if you're super busy or not, if you are super busy, there are people that actually want to see you succeed. Find your friends, find your family, and say, hey, I just need you to do this one thing. But like, in order to be consistent, I had to find somebody to help me do it. Otherwise, what's the point? So that's a good call.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on because shoot, we've already almost talked an hour. But real quick, we're going to go to segment 3. This is the playbook, more strategies from success. I want to talk about, from your perspective, I mean, you've been working at these amazing companies. What separates the great from the good from great? Like, what's the difference? So from your perspective, what are the top 1% of professionals doing differently than others?
From my perspective, and especially as somebody who's worked with entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 leaders, is that consistency is one. They're very, very consistent and they don't deviate from that. The other thing is that they don't look back. They're always looking ahead. They're always planning the next thing. So if they made a mistake or what they may deem like a learning opportunity, it's always that turn there, is that they don't dwell on it. And I know, like, I'm guilty of it too. A lot of us, we spend a lot of time thinking about the past. Like, oh, I should have done this, or God, I wish I would have done that. Man, and then we beat ourselves up about it. People who are high performers and who have a level of success do not look back. It's only forward. I mean, one, you can't go back. I mean, I wish we could, but we can't go back. But it's always looking ahead and planning for that next thing. They see their goal in front of them and they've created a step, a process to how to achieve that goal. So that is something that I've noticed that I've basically, and that's something, that a muscle that I'm working on a daily basis to achieve as well. But that is what I notice, I would say, from the top 1% that I've, been lucky enough every now and then to rub elbows with.
That's a great reminder. And tying it to sports, especially in football, I pretended to play quarterback my freshman year until I got body slammed and sacked on the handoff. And I realized, no, my son's trying to play. But one of the things that the top athletes always say is, especially quarterbacks, you have to have bad memory. If you throw an interception, you cannot keep thinking about it. If you're playing golf and you slice it, you can't keep thinking about it because it will throw you off. So
it will.
Obviously, having a good memory of memorizing names helps, but like the practical part of not dwelling on your past and keeping that in front of mind when there's so many other things going on.
Yeah.
That's a really good call. That's a really good call. On the other end of that, what do you think are some common mistakes that people are doing when they're trying to build their brand or network off? What's some things that we're doing wrong?
The number one thing that I see people doing wrong is trying to be somebody else. That's the big thing. They say, "Oh, I saw this person and they do it like this, and they're creating this way, they show up this way," and it just doesn't work. It doesn't translate because it's not authentic. So I'm guilty of that too. I've done that in the past, but I would say that the only way to figure out your voice and how you show up is by doing. You have to actually do it. So it's just like working out, right? If you want the great 6-pack or 2-pack, whatever it is you want, you actually have to show up every day. Yeah, I know. And trust me, I'm pissed every day when I realize I worked out once this week and I'm like, I still don't have the body that I want. But that's the same thing. So there is power in doing. You actually have to do things. And the more you do it, the more learnings that you get from it. You can't just sit on the sidelines and say, "Oh, that's what I want to do. I see that thing over there." No, you actually have to get in the game.
Just the game.
You got to get in the game. Once you're in the game, you can start to figure out, okay, this way works, this way doesn't. And it starts refining that personal brand for you. You start having an understanding of what works, what doesn't. But if you spend your whole time planning and thinking and sit on the sidelines, it'll never happen. It'll never happen. So you just got to throw yourself out there in the deep end and figure it out later.
I feel like you need to be a life coach. This is what this feels like.
I was certified as a life coach
I could see
many moons ago. Many moons ago. I never re-upped it just because I just didn't have the time to do it. But yeah, maybe I pulled some skills from it. I don't know. But thank you.
I'm going to give you some time to talk about how people can find you. But real quick, the last segment we'll do is, and this is something that I'm very interested in. It's a segment for is game day rituals. It's the day you have to show up to work or the day you have to do your podcast or whatever it is. What are some daily non-negotiables for you? What are the routines? What are some habits that you do? Because you're doing Too Ambitious Consulting, you're doing Too Ambitious Live, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
Managing corporate and entrepreneur world. What are the things you're doing? Exercising, vitamins, what are the things that you're keeping your mind, your body, your soul running the right way?
I'm going to be completely honest, is that I'm not perfect, and I realize that many a day I know I'm not perfect, I do try my very best. And what I do is pretty much every morning, unless it's a weekend, I get up at 7:30 and I drink water because that's what you're supposed to do. You drink your water. I hate water, but I drink it. And then after that, I either make a matcha or I do some sort of adaptogenic tea. So think your green tea, think your ginger tea, whatever, dandelion, whatever, because all that stuff is good for the liver and just being healthy and looking great. So the other thing that I do is I try to exercise 3 or 4 times a week. Now, again, I'm not perfect. Completely failed on that last week. Completely failed. But this week I worked out yesterday and it's only Tuesday, so I know I'm going to be killing my exercise this week. So those are the things that I do. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I worked out twice this week as well.
Look at you.
A weird week. We won't talk about why that is, but...
Right. That part. We're not going to talk about that. The other thing, too, is that I pray and I do affirmations. I usually have affirmations up, around me. So when I get and sit at my desk, I have my affirmations that I send. And I just take about 5 minutes to myself just to do some deep breathing and just to kind of think about what it is I want to achieve for the day. So that's what I usually do. Now, if I wake up late, then that all goes to hell.
Okay. So being consistent on waking up on time.
Right.
Exercising.
Yes.
Hydrating. The right way.
Exactly.
With you balancing all the other things, are you planning out your week, planning out your month? Are you a physical calendar? How are you actually keeping yourself together?
Yeah, for sure. I use Google Calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. I cannot remember many things. And I think it's because I'm juggling so many things, but I put it in my calendar. I've tried writing things down like a to-do list complete failure. That does not work for me. So I have to put it in the Google Calendar, which notifies me, hey, by the way, you're supposed to be doing. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. So that's what I realize works for me. I also try and do things all together. So when I'm creating content, I try to shoot more pieces of content all during the same day because I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my makeup that day. Like before I did the show, I shot some content and I shot a video for LinkedIn earlier and everything like that. So I was like, okay, this is the day you're going to be, and I have an event to go to later on tonight. So I was like, this is perfect because I just do the hair and makeup. I'm good. I'm going to do it all in this day. It just makes sense, that sort of thing. I think the other thing that's really important to me is to have those times where there's focus times where I'm like, this is the time that I've got to focus and get this thing done. And also to have days that I'm not like beholden to anything. So that's typically for me, Mondays and Fridays. I typically do not have meetings on those days. If something happens, if I end up sleeping a little bit late that day, that's okay. But I give myself grace on those days, which I didn't used to do. But you have to put those breaks in your day because we're not machines.
Right. Yeah.
You're a human being. You need that time to reset. You need that time as a creative. You need that time to think about the creative process and things that you actually want to create.
Calendar, focus, space is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
All right. We are coming to the end here. This is the last closing segment. I'm going to call this 2-minute drill. I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
The first one being, what's one skill that everyone should master to have a successful career?
Well, I will say storytelling and how to be and writing. I think that's something that, like I said, you cannot really, that's something that people can't take away from you. So whether it's writing or how to tell a story, and I will say this, there are a lot of ways that you can tell a story. You can figure out which way makes sense for you, whether it's, for instance, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I'm drawn to certain podcasts because of how they tell the story and how they deliver it. It's the same thing if you are someone who watches a lot of YouTube. There's a reason why you keep going back to a certain content creator because you like how they tell the story. So consider that. Now, I'm not saying that you got to go out here and be like, okay, now I know how to write a story, but you have to know how to craft a story. If you're in a meeting, you're telling a story. If you have to create a presentation, you have to tell a story. You're doing any type of presentation and you're, doing virtual or in person, you need to know how to tell a story. So that's the one thing that I would say master, and use social media to help you master it. There's tons of great storytellers out there.
Yeah.
Find them and see how they tell their stories. Instagram, Threads, TikTok even. There's people who can tell you a great story in 12 seconds. That's genius.
That's where I am. I'm long-winded and I've been trying, and that's my goal for this year, along with filming at least one podcast episode a week.
Amazing.
I have to figure out the genius of being able to tell a beautiful story or a joke.
Yeah.
Succinctly is, I struggle. Anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of storytelling, is there a book or resource that you really recommend on how to be a better storyteller or how to think about personal branding?
Now I'm going to
podcast even.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little controversial, to be honest. I have not read personal branding books. Now, here's why. Now, I'm not saying that they're not great ones out there. The reason why I don't is because it is very easy for me to read somebody else's stuff and it's in here and then I start regurgitating it. So I want whatever I'm sharing with you to come from me. It needs to feel authentic to me. Now, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I love Trevor Noah's podcast. There's another one, Ratchet and Respectable, because I have that duality as well. And
still I thought we did, but not all of us, but I understand.
Yeah. I love that. And let's see, books that I read. So one of my favorite books is called The Four Agreements. And that one I think I recommend it to everyone. It's a quick read. It's easy. And it has helped me tremendously in life in terms of how to think about things and how to show up. In terms of being in corporate, especially if you're a Black woman, I think you've probably heard of Minda Harts. Her book, The Memo, was one that was instrumental for me. What Women of Color Need to Secure the Seat at the Table. She's written 3 other books since then. She's brilliant. I would say if you're in corporate and you're a Black woman or a woman of color, for sure, read that, or read all of her books. Another podcaster that I really love is I love Marie Forleo. Her podcast is really great. Most of the podcasts that I listen to are ones that I'm getting information or I'm learning how to take better care of myself. And just information, because I don't know everything. I really don't. Diary of a CEO.
Why don't you?
And, like people like Stephen Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO. He has so many amazing people on there. I'm fascinated every time I listen to his show. I'm like, I had no idea. This is amazing. So I listen to learn. I consider it, going to school or something like that. That's how I kind of get the information that I get from. So, yeah.
You just dropped a bunch of jewels in like a minute. So this is good. I'll try to put them in our description on the video.
Yeah, of
Last
course.
question before I want to give you some space to tell us where we can find you. If you give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
The one thing that I would tell my younger self is, well, first of all, is to invest, because when I was starting off in my career, I had no idea. I thought you needed tons of money to invest, So now that I'm older, I'm like, Mom, could have been doing this when I was 23, like you don't need a lot of money. You just need the knowledge, investing into the S&P 500 and, buying stock, even if you're buying a stock, a month with your small salary for now, but all of that grows. But I did not know that when I was younger. And then the other thing is to get a mentor or get a career coach. I did not know that was available to me when I was coming up. I thought it was only for executives or for people who were at a certain level. But no, you can get a career coach being entry level, starting in your new company. You can get a career coach anytime, but humble yourself enough to know that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And I think I was definitely young, ambitious, and cocky. And I thought I knew everything. But as I got older, I'm like, unbelievable,
Same.
I'm sure all of us feel that way as well.
Just a little bit. Okay, Trish, this has been amazing. I want to give some space here as well. How can we find you? You have your live show, you have consulting, you're doing a lot. So what are you doing? What are the websites or what are the channels we can do to find you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. You can message me on LinkedIn. I'm Trish Lindo at LinkedIn. And the easiest way is just DM me because I'm always on LinkedIn. The other way is when you're on my profile, I do have a website, trishlindo.com, easy peasy. My show, Too Ambitious, is live every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. It's 30 minutes. It's quick in and out. Get your information from all these incredible women founders. And it's every Thursday.
Is it a new person every Thursday or
It's a new person every Thursday. Yes. And it is, it's live on LinkedIn and it streams also too on my YouTube channel. I used to stream on IG as well, but I'm using Restream and it's become just like a hot mess. But whatever. We'll talk about that another time. But you can always find it. And if you are on LinkedIn and if you're like, hey, I missed it, it's okay. It's in my feed. So if you're on my profile, you'll be able to see that show anytime. You can go back and watch it if you want. So, yeah.
Trish Lindo at LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
The live show. I'm going to put all this in the description. So if people are looking for you, they'll be there as well.
Yep.
And then I think I'm obviously following you on LinkedIn. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways to do that. So it's amazing. Trish,
yeah.
One, I'll say thank you to Angela for connecting us.
Woo!
You are the best. Anyway, this has been amazing.
Yes.
This has been actual real things that I think people don't really think about your branding and what you really need to do to play the game and how you really need to show up, how you can actually show up better on LinkedIn and YouTube and the consistency. So thank you. This has been extremely helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for other people that are listening or watching. This has been the Level Up Career Playbook podcast. My name is Brian Bell. That was Trish Lindo. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.